Okay, hi. Hi, I'm Ramsey. As said, I'm a comic creator and writer from South London, and I really love doing organizing this PowerPoint and talking about this because I've never really done a blow by blow of like all the decisions I've made in writing for IP. But let's start with who am I? I am Ramsey. I came to the UK when I was 4 years old with my family. We were refugees from Somalia. And I basically didn't go to art school, but my comic school was my local corner shop and my local comic shop, pictured here. So I used to get loads of comics. I used to just make up my own stuff based on the things I've read. If you go to the next slide, sorry. Um, basically, I used to pick up my like comics I really enjoyed, and I did my own versions of them. So this you can see here. This is like a version of of this Power Pack comic, and I did my own one. And I used to draw them on the back of my exercise book, at school exercise books, and scan them and do a lot of those Photoshop digital jiggery pokery and make it all magical. And this is something I did when I was like 14, I think, 14 years old. And yeah, that was sort of like the beginning of like me thinking, you know what? I can probably, hopefully, fingers crossed, do this for a job. And then if you go to the next slide. Oh yes, sorry. If you go back one slide, can you get this in this? Sorry. Yes. So basically, what I used to do, as you would notice here, I used to make up my own comics, and they were very much influenced by the stuff that I read. And my art teacher, Miss Gordon, was awesome. Basically, she used to see the comics I used to make, and she was very encouraging. And one of the things that she said that really made an impact on me was she'd look at the stuff that I'd make like this, for example, and then she'd be like, "Oh, Ramsey, this is really cool, but have you ever considered adding more black characters?" And I was like, "Hmm, interesting." So for me, I just basically regurgitated all the stuff that I took in. So I used to just have like out of like five or six characters, there would be one character of color and the rest would be like white characters. And a lot of that was basically, yeah, regurgitating the demographics that I read. And if we go to the next slide, I didn't know when I got older, I read this book by Francis Fanon, if you flick, yep, called Black Skin, White Masks. And it really talks about how in colonialism and just like racism in general can lead black individuals to internalize white cultural standards. And this is for everyone, if you're reading a lot of cishet stuff, that might be the stuff you start making initially until you start looking at yourself like, why am I marginalizing myself? You start questioning yourself. This is like basically, I was like a young teenager at this point, probably the age of some of the people watching this. So yeah, I started thinking about um putting myself in the stuff that I made, which sounds crazy because normally most people would do that, but yeah, it was like an original idea for me back then. If we go to the next slide, yes, and this was sort of like really big for me because I used to just read mainstream like Marvel and DC IP as we are talking about today. And I went to my very first web and mini comics fair back in the like 2009 or 2010. And it was super inspiring for me because there is where I first got to see people making comics about their own lives. There was a lot of like black comics, queer comics, like feminist comics, and a lot of the stuff that really hit me was stuff that they'll take um genre conventions and then put it through a different lens, and it was really impactful and like inspired me to do that within my own indie comics. If we get to the next slide, these were the first three comics I ever made. So the first one was a collection of three short stories. And the second one was called Zorse, which is basically a comic about my childhood, coming to the UK as a refugee. And both of those first two comics, Triangle and Zorse, came out the same year. So I had this idea where I was going to make Triangle was basically three short stories that I wrote, and I commissioned artists to illustrate them. And Zorse was the one that I wrote and illustrated myself. And that was nominated for a British Comic Award in 2016. So it came out 2015, nominated for a British Award, and in 20 the year after, and it was the only self-published book there, and it was like a real like eye opener for me. I was like, wow, if you could write about yourself, people do respond to that, and people do like affects people, and it then got me to make this comic magazine called Junk Food. Basically, there was a magazine in the late 80s, early 90s called Deadline Magazine that had was the first to have like Tank Girl and like a lot of Jamie Hewitt's early stuff before he did Gorillas and stuff like that. And a lot of it, reading it like back in the middle of the 2010s, even then it was really dated, and even though it's supposed to be a comic magazine for everybody, it was very blokey, and there was a like real sense of like misogyny through it. um and I was like, I've got a collection of six short stories, why don't I turn that into a magazine? So I found a bunch of up and coming journalists via Tumblr, and I think it was during the time where Rookie magazine was really big, and there was a lot of um magazines that were coming from more feminist queer perspective, like Polyester, and there was one called Mush Pit and stuff like that. And there were, and I was really influenced by that magazine side of things. So, and I blended it with the comics, and it became Junk Food. And that comic was picked up by an editor. I sold out at Gosh Comics, and an editor from 2000 AD picked it up and read it, and we liked it, and sent me an email and was like, "Hey, do you want to do a short story in Tammy and Ginty magazine, which is a girls' magazine, comic magazine that they were revitalizing?" And it was my very first IP job. So now we are back in the topic of this talk. So next slide. Uh, yes. And they want like I sent them a bunch of pictures, and the one that they responded date of a character called Catgirl, because basically Tammy and Ginty had a bunch of old comics magazines that were aimed at a girl audience, and I basically looked at the stuff that they did publish and tried to do my own version of them. So this magazine was basically this comic was basically about a girl who gets a cat costume by her private investigator father, who was on a trip to Africa and found this magical cat costume via a witch hunter, a witch doctor, and gave it to her, and she wore it, and it gave her cat powers, and she decided to solve mysteries, or help her dad solve mysteries via this costume. Um, and if we go to the next slide, um, that's when basically at the end of my pitch, I basically wrote that I basically for my pitch, I basically totally remixed the comic. So I made the girl um biracial, and I made her mother, instead of a witch doctor, I made her mother be part of a almost like a protector, um from like a line of protectors of the village that she's from in West Africa, and the costume is almost like something that gets passed down through her family, and I sent an email. Yeah. And basically an email just basically talks about how I thought the original premise of a white girl wearing a magical suit that her father got from Witch Doctor was very outdated, and it's sort of like this trope of like magical black people, and so I thought that the African influence of the story would be more substantial if I made it part of the girl's legacy. As I said, it came from her mother, um And I got an email back from the editor. They were like, "You're right. About the racist tropes in the story. But I was thinking if you could just instead of making her a remix of Kathy, if you made her like the granddaughter of the original Cat Girl, and keep the witch doctor element, but but like look back on it as sort of like almost like a bad heirloom, I guess, which I didn't really jive with. So if you cut to the next slide, yes, I didn't really jive with that. So I started reading articles about museums and with a lot using a lot of stolen artifacts, and I was like, what if we made the father an unreliable narrator where he tells his daughter that he was gifted this costume when really he stole it, a lot like what museums did. And I put in a Black Panther type element where he stole the costume, and the backstory that I was hoping to do in further issues was that uh, a representative from that village comes to the UK to reclaim the costume that was stolen, and does, and they he falls in love with Kathy, and they form a relationship, and they have a daughter, and the suit gets kept behind. So if you flip to the next bit, um, next slide, sorry. Um, yeah, I made it so the daughter was biracial, and that the costume but the costume was actually stolen by the grandfather, and it was part of sort of like the like legacy dark legacy of the dad. If this all makes sense. And then then I could get on with the story. But um yeah, I didn't really get time to flesh out the whole story because it was a one-off, so I had to make brief mentions of it. So that was just basically me trying to defang a lot of the older problematic elements within that story. I know that it might not have been um an issue for a lot of other writers who might have just said, "Cool, I'll just go write it." But for me, I just felt like I felt uncomfortable by a lot of the initial premises, and it was good that the editor shared my opinion, and I could broach it with him and um, shoot ideas back and forth on how to rejig it for a modern audience. So get to the next slide. Yes. So after that, my next that did really well, and I was asked to revamp another old title called Harlem Heroes, and that ran in the very first issue of 2000 AD, and they're going to bring it back for today. So basically, it's a futuristic sport set in the future where uh, where there's a futuristic sport called Airball, and the best team are called the Harlem Heroes, and they're based on the Globetrotters underneath. Ugh, sorry, guys. And was called um, a lot of it was because it was like the early 80s. A lot of it was inspired by um, like 70s sci-fi, like Rollerball, which was basically these sort of like gladiatorial death games that were a precursor to the Hunger Games, where they were used for ratings, and there was like a comment on ultra violence and how games can be used as a distraction, entertainment could be used as a distraction during really dark and difficult times for people. And this was notable because it was the only story or strip in 2000 AD that featured a predominantly black cast. Um, so I was given this thing. They're like, "Hey, Ramsey, sci-fi, futuristic sport, deadly games. Can you update it. And as you can see, it matches the original influence, which was the Harlem Globetrotters, in that they're a team of all men. Okay, so if we flip to the next slide, uh, yeah, so this basically goes into talking about how the original comic was like. It's basically the first black led book and all the other things I just said. Next slide. Yes. So one of the things that I immediately wanted to change, I looked at there's an old cartoon series about the Harlem Globetrotters, and if you compare it, for example, to this like little collage of Marvel superheroes, you'd notice that every Marvel character here is has the same skin tone the other as the other one. And the cool thing about the Harlem Globetrotters cartoon was, I think it came out in the 70s as well, and they managed to put a bunch of different skin tones on all the different characters, which I thought was very realistic. You know, if you have any team of um black characters, you'll notice that they're all varying skin tones. So I was like, well, I wanted to first do this, so um, it's a more realistic. So I think a lot of nowadays it's a lot easier just to give them the same skin tone, and it's unrealistic. And then if we go to the next slide, um, because this is a really great article on the nib by comic artist Ronald Wimberly, and the article is called Lighten Up, and it's basically about his experience of um, he writes and illustrates his own comics and working with Marvel and creating this character. He was Latino, and he colored her um, an, an appropriate color, but the editor told him to lighten up the character. They thought that she was too dark looking, I think. It says it in the first box here. It says also, guys, lighten up Melanie's skin tone a bit. And he was like kind of like um thrown by that, because the term Latina is a combination of different types of identity and skin tone within that. It's a really broad racial category. And he goes really into that and the history of colorism in comics. So whether, it might sound a bit extra if I say, hey, I want a team, a black um sports team with varying skin tones, but it's trying to get close to an authenticity that you hardly ever see in comics. So if you flip to the next one. Yeah, and I even saw it within when I've commissioned the cover of my second comic. The first bit of art I got through was the before section, and you notice like it's a lot of lighter skin tone, and the character was based on me, and I'm a lot darker than that. So I did shoot an email back saying, "Hey, do you think about darkening the skin tone?" Because I think a lot of people think, I don't know if it's like they think a lighter skin tone is more photogenic or less threatening. I don't know, but people tend to go for lighter skin tone if you don't give them the guideline to make it darker. Um, and if we flip to the next slide, so yeah, so when I this is the modern version, the one that me and the artist came up with, and we wanted to, as you can see, we um, went for different types of skin tone, and we just went full on with the color. Actually, we made it more, and the layouts were very like manga influenced, very like hyperkinetic, and also one of the things we wanted to do, if you go to the next slide, is the team leader was a non-binary character, and we based their design off um, the androgynous look of Greystones. And yeah, and one of the things that I decided in the writing was that because it was set in a future, um, it was like a more more uh informed society where non-binary identity is kind of a given. Like nobody, it's not a big issue. And I just casually put in the they them pronouns and didn't you know um turn it into like a mass thing. Like, oh, their team leader is non-binary. I didn't make it into a thing. I bet because normal because it is normal. Um, but one of the things I found out was when the comic came out, characters. I mean, the readers did a lot of the readers did misgender and think that it was a boy character rather than a girl, like rather than a non-binary character. Um, and I then figured out because you see it in a lot of criticism about non-binary characters or like characters with different gender where they'll go, oh, don't make a a thing out of it. Why don't you just write it normal? But you kind of have to. You kind of. I realize you kind of have to lampshade it because otherwise people will misgender the characters. You kind of have to be like, yes, this is a non-binary character, and actually say out loud, because people will misgender it. Because I did, going the subtle route does not work. And then next slide. Yeah, and another thing about Harlem Heroes was that it was very much steeped in the politics of the 70s when they were first looking into the idea when sports became more televised and they were looking at kind of like the commercialization of sport. And I was like, okay, I've made sure that the comic is racially up to date and has some like modern depictions of gender identities that weren't in the comic, and our editor was non-binary, and that helped a lot. Um, but I wanted to make the politics of it like modern as well. And I read at the time we were writing it was when the European Super League was happening, and basically that was about like the top British football teams being taken away from the Premier League and being put into this Super League that would be like really expensive to um, follow because like is because like the tickets are huge and they would no longer be part of the British football scene and become like this big European scene. And a lot of fans revolted and the idea was quashed. So I thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool if Airball had a similar situation where um um all the top teams are in this really expensive sport that nobody sees and there's this like grungy lower league that the champions of that league, when they become like the best teams, get picked up and get put into the ultra league and are instantly no longer available to the public, and only if you're rich you get to see them. So I was like, oh, let me try and make this more of a statement. So, like as you can see in this clip here, the robot commentator asks Gem, like, as cup winners, you're now eligible to join the Ultra League. How excited are you? And they say, who says we'll accept? And they go into this little mini speech when they say, I want to say to the fat cats of the Ultra League, you've made airball into a elite sport, one that costs millions to play and hundreds to see. So we challenge Ultra League Titans, the Harlem Hellcats, to a match, champions versus champions. If we win, you bring airball back to the people, but if we lose, we'll disband. So just basically trying to put that bit of modern politics into the comic as well. We go next slide. Cool. So after that, I was doing a lot of theatre work actually, and I got an unexpected email from Marvel. So if you next to the next slide. Yes, they wanted to discuss this character called Spider UK for a miniseries they wanted to do called Edge of Spider-Verse, where they were taking comic creators from all around the world to come up with different variations of spider characters, and they came to me um, wanting to hear my ideas about a British Spider-Man. So next slide. Cool. Um, During that time, they'd released a comic called "What If Miles Morales Became Thor," and that comic was a bit controversial because its depictions of Miles Morales as basically they turned just because Miles Morales is now Thor, they turned like Asgard into this sort of uh like I don't know, like cliched uh urban neighborhood with like um trainers hanging off wires and everything graffitified and really cheesy lines like by Odin's Fade and like having graffiti all over his hammer and him saying hammer time and stuff like that, which got a really negative reaction um online. And if you flick to the next slide, one of the things that I really found that nobody really spoke about was how um also the depictions of Miles himself, because I feel like a lot of the artists they hire are from like Spain and Italy, where they have sort of like not a great racial relations. And if you can see in that top left-hand corner, like this is a drawing of Mars. He doesn't really look very heroic. He looks very mean. You could almost mistake him for a villain. And if you compare him to the Miles that is mostly known via the Spider-Verse cartoons at here, um, he it looks like a normal black teenager. Um, so like that's one of the striking things. And there's this idea also of like black teenagers becoming um the adultification of adult teenagers, where they don't really get to become kids or depicted as kids. They immediately get turned into adults, which you can see in this like Thor type character who you wouldn't guess was like 17. He looks a lot older. And but yeah, it's like I wouldn't like that was one of the things looking at it that really struck me by it. If you go to the next slide. Yes, and yeah, this goes more into it. And you go next slide again. Cool. So then I was um confronted with this issue, this problem, which was how do you convey? So they wanted me to write to the Spider UK to become a Muslim character. So I had to ask myself, how do you convey Islam in a 17-page superhero comic that feels natural, maybe even fun, but it will cause zero drama or backlash at all. So I had to like think about that. Then we go to the next slide. Um, Basically, when I got given the task, um, I did not start from a blank slate. There was this costume on the left-hand side, which was designed by Zoe Thorogood, and there was this cover on the right that was already pre illustrated before the story even came out. So I had those to work with. I didn't have a blank page. So I was like, this is interesting. And I had to basically come up with the story based on those things. And on top of that, I had to look at this character and be like, this character is they want this character to be Muslim as well, which is my background. So if we flip to the next slide, um, it was a very it was my first experience of sort of like retrofitted storylines. Because before with Catgirl and Harlem Heroes, I tend to have created those from scratch. Give me a second. Okay, sorry about that. So I created those characters from scratch, whereas this I had to I had some um pre-designed stuff, and it reminded me of the filmmaker Roger Corman, who basically he made movies in a really interesting way where he would hear about somebody will pitch him the idea. He'll get a photo, he'll get a poster made, and then he would pitch the idea to a focus group with the poster, and if they liked it, then they'll write a screenplay based on the poster and shoot the film. So it just felt like the comic book version of that. So if you flip to the next slide, okay. So yeah, so this is a lot of the reason why they wanted to go the Islamic route was that there was a Spider UK in the Across the Spider-Verse film, and she was the first hijabi Spider-Man. So if we cut to the next slide, her name was Malala Windsor, right? And it had on her hijab, it had like the British flag and stuff. And I don't know, it felt because it was created by like two white Americans, and I don't know, it felt kind of tropey to me. Like you take her first name's Malala based on the activist, and they combine it with the Royal House of Windsor to create this like I don't know Muslim Britain. It felt very clips art, and I knew that just looking at it and the way it was presented, it was very much felt very much like clickbait. So if you go to the next slide, it's like people said like, oh, London's fallen. It's like all the newspapers will go crazy. It's like the most ultra like firebrand type idea. So if you go to the other slide, next slide, I had to think of a different idea. Sorry, if you go back, I had to think. Sorry, I had to think of a less dodgy idea. How can I present it, as I said, in a really natural way that feels real to me? Because it's my community, and that isn't um as tropey, and I felt it was quite cack-handed. So if you go to the next slide, I created this character based on uh the Muslim women I know and see all around me in London. Some wear hijab, some don't wear a hijab. Um, um, and I wanted to give her a proper name, but also a name that um, connects to the Marvel trope of having alliterative names. So like Peter Parker, PP, I had to think of, okay, let me think of an alliterative name that is more real. So I named her after my friend Zarina, and I called her Zarina Zahari because it had a really good ring to it. And it was like a real name, real person. And I made her a gamer, and just a regular person rather than like conveying Islam in a really natural way rather than like really trippy way. Oh, the hijab becomes the religion, the symbol of that. But and when it is to a degree, but there's a lot of women that don't wear it. So if you flip to the next slide, yeah. So then when I came up with the character, I had to ask myself, what is the core of every Spider-Man story when I was trying to come up with this story? So the Spider-Man narrative is defined by a constant, often painful friction between Peter Parker's private life and his responsibilities as a superhero. Like, for example, he could be walking to the off license to get no, you could be walking to the pharmacy to get some medicine for Aunt May, and he gets a call from Mary Jane who says, "Hey, do you want to see a movie tonight?" And he'd be like, "Cool." So he'd be on his way, and then there's a Doctor Octopus attack of New York, and he has to fight Doctor Octopus in time before the pharmacy closes, so he can get the medicine and all that kind of stuff. So it's all like how the real life conflicts with your superhero life. It's a very much a Spider-Man thing. So go to the next slide. Um, but then I had to actually think about like what is Spider-Man beyond that? Because he's also known as your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. It's very much what's called in industry as a the street level like superhero, right? Second. Okay. And in so I'll give you a quick overview of what is a street level hero, right? And in the world of Marvel Comics, there's countless superheroes with incredible abilities, but who protect the universe or whatever. However, not every hero has a grandiose cosmic adventures. While heroes like the Avengers handle all-powerful villains like Ultron and Thanos, the rest of the world must deal with the everyday crime of gangsters, thieves, and killers. That's where street level superheroes come in. While the exact definition is vague, a street level hero is generally a superhero who primarily protects a local neighborhood and fights everyday criminals. Okay. And weirdly, black superheroes tend to fall into this. As it says here, black heroes are often portrayed as street level because their narratives are historically rooted in representing, protecting, and empowering urban communities. Um, so yeah, they want in a way that they want black characters to talk about urban problems and racial problems. They tend to be then really rooted to cities, whilst their white counterparts tend to, have intergalactic adventures, which was something that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So if you go to the next slide, there's this clip by Jelani Cobb, who's an Afro-American writer, educator, and he's a dean of journalism in Columbia University. So if we click
Luke Cage is a
the
paradox. You
video,
know, it's a paradoxical. He was a paradoxical character, and as a child, I liked him, but I really, truthfully, liked Wolverine more. You know, I suppose I was supposed to identify with Luke Cage as this young African American, but there were things about the character that didn't connect with what I found most interesting about superheroes, which were like the world that they lived in, where they were confronting these huge evils and there were always these grand ideals saving humanity. Whereas Luke Cage, Power Man, he had a much more mundane set of problems. Like I remember an issue where he was trying to figure out how he was going to pay the rent on his office, and that wasn't the escape that I was looking for as a young person. It didn't. And as I got older, I kind of became more critical.
yeah, and I tend to agree with that in a sense of like, as a black kid reading comics, you're looking for escapism, you're looking for like cool adventures, and it seemed to me back then that the white heroes were getting to do a lot of cool stuff, whereas like the black heroes were a lot of them were kind of like tied to the cities that they came from, and there was not much of escapism within those stories. So if we next slide, and looking into because there was a Spider UK in Marvel before the one that I created, and that character was very much tied to the Captain Britain idea. Um, so he got to do that, and then I was like, how then can what extra element can I give my character? Because I didn't want this Spider UK to be street level character, or maybe there was an element to her character that was street level, but I wanted her to have bolder adventures. And there was this organization within um, Marvel superheroes that were called WHO, which stand for the Weird Happenings Organization, which is like a British paramilitary group tasked to investigate and handle supernatural and superhuman um, events or crisis. And I was like, wow, what if she worked for them? And and there was a bit of like a X-Files type Buffy type thing to her job. So she wasn't always swinging around the city. capturing thieves. She was going and having these like really cool supernatural adventures. Next slide. So, the, the the adventure that I came up with was that there is a they're digging in the they're digging a new route in the underground, and they unearth a frozen dragon that wakes up and starts wrecking London and turning. And it has this like ability to turn people into dragons too. So it was coming to a bit of like a dragon pandemic almost. Um, and she had to go and solve it. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. It gives it more of a fantasy vibe. If you click next slide. Um, okay, and then going back to the source, when I first was offered the job, I had the character design already designed and the cover was already designed. And as you can see in this corner, there's like an energy blast coming out of her hand. So obviously writing it, then I had to figure out what that was. So I knew that she had some kind of electrical power, and I didn't know because I had to do my own like research. I didn't know that there is this trope of black superheroes having electricity powers. And looking at a bunch of articles, I found this one from Gizmondo, and it's where it says, was it the black electricity trope reads like a distant cousin to the magical Negro in that they're both established formations of a character whose most defining qualities are a preternatural understanding and command of natural force. And it goes without saying that Storm from X-Men is probably the most iconic example of the black electricity trope, but she's also a character who's transcended much of its limitations as a result to being written and depicted thoughtfully across a variety of different mediums. Storm isn't just a hero who throws lightning bolts. She's one of the most complicated and nuanced comic book characters created in the last 40 years. So I was stuck with this power, and I think my way of using it, I was like, okay, this is a pathway. Like Storm has this power, but because she's like thoughtfully written and she's beyond her power, um, that she kind of transcended that. And like, okay, maybe I can use some of that. And if you get to come to the next slide, I was like, maybe I can use some of that, and also I can take the emphasis off the electricity powers. So one of the things I started researching was abilities that spiders have, and I discovered this power called ballooning, which is basically when spiders use uh, electricity that's already in the air to fly because they use their um, threads of web, and that reacts to the currents of the electric fields. And they use it as almost sort of like a, a, a almost like an air balloon does to travel through the air. So I was like, hey, maybe she can use her electricity like that. So like the electricity is just a means to an end. She's not just throwing 5 volts at people. She's actually using it to interact with the air and fly. Right. So that was a way of getting around it. And also thought it was really interesting if she has these like earrings that control that help moderate her powers, and when she wants to go full electricity, she takes them off, and then her hair gets unleashed, and and she's full into the electric part of it. And also, I was like, okay, how? And then what more can I add just to take more emphasis of off the electricity? I thought, well, she has this leather jacket, and I was like, I wanted it to be more than a fashion statement. And I was like, what if the pockets were almost like in D&D when you've got like a bag of holding or something like that? Like it holds anything you want it in. It's like these sort of like extra dimensional pockets that can fit anything in there, right? So I was like, wow. And then it has sort of like a use beyond looking cool. So if we go to the next slide, then I have to think of the Muslim part. So I thought the power part. Now I have to think of the Muslim part. There's loads of Muslim Spider-Man memes that are quite funny. I really like them. Next slide. Sorry. I had to think of how shall I do it? So I was like, going back to the Spider-Man sort of element, like the archetypal Spider-Man story where his responsibilities as a superhero clashes with his own private life. I thought, what if we set the story in Ramadan? Okay, and Ramadan is a month where Muslims fast and they can only eat when the sun goes down, and at the end of it, they have Eid where they can start eating again. So I was like, okay, what if it's in the middle of Ramadan, she's fasting, and her job has given her some time off during that month, but there's a dragon attack. So that's like her private life. Her private life being clashed with a superhero life, and a lot of people, I guess, non-Muslims can't really relate with Ramadan, but they can relate with being hungry, and they can relate with waiting to eat again, maybe being in school and be like, oh, I'm starving, I can't wait till lunchtime, or even at work. And also, there's a lot of like modern day things with for, during Ramadan as well, where they have like fasting trackers on your phone. So I thought, oh, this would be cool to have in a story because it also like works as a visual ticking clock where she's waiting when she can eat again. But yeah, I thought, wow, not many people relate with Ramadan, but they will relate with being hungry and waiting to eat. So I made that part of the story. So I interweaved that with the dragons and all that kind of stuff. And that became what it was. Next slide. And that was what I passed on to Marvel. I was like, hey, I've done the story. It's called, send it out there. It's done. I had no idea how it was going to be received, if people will hate it, if the depiction of the character would fly, because she's very much a London contemporary Muslim. And also, I thought that the fasting element would add cool stakes, but you never know if that might alienate people. I don't know. It worked for me, but I delivered it and waited to see what people thought about it. We cut to the next slide. And then here's a video of what people thought.
Have you ever heard of Zarina Sahari? No? Then let's get to learn our new spider friend. Zarina is also known as Spider UK, from Earth 834. She's from London, specifically South London. She's Muslim as well. At one point after a fight in the comics, she's seen ending her fast before having a light snack. And you're probably wondering how her hair went from a protective hairstyle to its natural state. Well, she has really cool electric powers similar to Miles Morales. The earrings that she has in her ears helps her regulate the electric pulses so it doesn't get too combobulated. But when taken out, she becomes somewhat of a lightning bolt. And her outfit is so hardcore. When discovering this character, it meant so much to me. I loved her so much that I ended up cosplaying her for October Comic Con. Let this be a reminder that no matter who you are, anyone can wear the mask.
I just want to go out of my way to super thank the creative team, because the inclusion of Spider UK's Islamic faith, her beautiful natural hair, it made this book feel like nothing else I bought all year in a way that made me say, yeah, worth every dime for the whole miniseries. And this character celebrates the diversity of the UK in a way that feels honest, natural. She has curves. She's not some skinny mini, even though she's fasting. She is a proud Islamic woman, but not in a way that she's some sort of uncool church lady. She's awesome. This is just a really well-designed character.
I came across her not long ago because I've been reading the Spider-Verse comics, and she's introduced in volume 2 where they give us a little backstory of her. So this is Zarina. She's also Spider UK of Earth 834. I really like the way they introduce her because she tells us that she's off work right now because she works for this company who investigate all these weird things that happen in London, right? Their Earth. And then she's like, it's Ramadan, so I'm not working because they don't want to overexert me. I don't want to like pass out because I've been fasted all day. 1 hour before she can break her fast, something happens and she's like, oh my god, I need to go right now. So she does her thing, right? That saves everyone just in time for her to open her fast. So her alarm goes off. It's like, oh, it's time, like it's iftar time, you can eat now. And as she's about to break her fast, Madam Web comes and she's like, she gets recruited into the spider army, right? And she's like, just before we go, can I please get a falafel because I didn't eat all day? Oh my god.
And while there's a degree to which I am won over already by the fact that there is a giant dragon turning people into other dragons, I think it also really highlights one of the really cool ways in which representation could be used to tell different kinds of stories. Here we see Zarina struggling at the end of a very long fast because, you know what, going to do a superhero job without any food in you, yeah, that's going to be tough.
One of the things that I think is great about it is you don't necessarily get to see these different aspects of UK culture that's baked into it. Normally, it feels like it's through an American lens where and I'm not saying anything about the previous Spider UK, but you usually have like, here's Captain UK, and he is dressed in the British flag, and he has one of those poofy hats the guards have on, and he's like, crikey, let's take a lift and eat some biscuits. And that's pretty much all you get. Versus here, of course, actually, London in particular is a very diverse place with a lot of different cultures there. So you're seeing a different aspect of that feels like it fits absolutely perfectly.
The second story is the Spider UK story, her name is Zarina. And she is Muslim, and she's been fasting for Ramadan when a big threat occurs that she has to go out for. So imagine, like, you've been fasting, it's almost the end time of your fast, and you got to go out and do superhero stuff. So that's pretty interesting. I would also like to say about this new Spider UK, she has a new spider power we've never seen before. So that's not her only power. She has a lot of the classic ones, but she has one additional power that, that's the spoiler alert part of the show. I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Yeah, so they got it. I was surprised that they got it. So it goes to show that, like, you might think that you're overthinking and you're over planning and you're reading too many essays and stuff, but people do pick up on it. And if you can find a way to like coalesce everything and make it seem natural or work naturally, I wouldn't say seem natural, like work naturally, people do connect with it. And yeah, all the things I was kind of a bit worried about, like, are they going to get the fasting stuff? People could relate, which sounds really cool, especially like in these times where, there's a lot of Islamophobia going around. So yeah, it was really like heartwarming and really galvanizing for me after I heard the reaction to that, to be like, wow, I can now be more thoughtful about how I, think about representation and really go to town and like really looking at articles and stuff and try and do the best I can the little time that I have. So yeah, that's my presentation. I think we're almost an hour now.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Ramsey. There were just so many cool examples, and I really liked all of the memes as well. That was great. I feel like it's going to be really helpful and interesting, and I'd like to invite everybody to type in the chat now if you have a question. Are you okay to answer some questions before we finish?
Yep, I'm totally cool.
Is that all right? Yeah. Amazing. Okay, cool. I guess like one of the questions that we had was because you were talking about connecting with people like through your work, and I know that you lead workshops as well, which is really cool, and it would be quite interesting to hear about that and how that kind of influences everything.
A lot of that, like, I do a lot of workshops now, basically at schools, and it's just basically I walk into an assembly stage. I we create basically a character from scratch and like a basic story. And by the end, we have like a comic. But the cool thing about it is like it teaches me as much as teaching them because it teaches me how to boil down my method into like really teachable chunks. And yeah, and it taught me to be a lot more streamlined in the way I want to write stories for myself. So yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I always learn so much from doing workshops and just hearing everyone's ideas. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we've got a question here. I wanted to ask, as a Black British person, is representing our cultures hard to an American audience, and is something that American companies are looking for? More Black British voices to accurately depict Black Brit stories and characters. I feel like I might not have read
Um,
that right. Sorry, Ramsey. Do you want me to read it again?
no, no, yeah, you can if you want.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask as a Black British person, is representing our cultures hard to an American audience? Okay, so is it hard to represent that to an American audience, or is it something that American companies are looking for, more Black British voices to accurately depict Black Brit stories and characters?
I,
Yeah.
I think they're just looking for good stories in general, but I feel like if you can translate um like just your general life and um the, the the culture aspects of your own life and try and find a way of articulating that via an entertaining story, a really cool plot, like with the Spider UK story is like, okay, how do I um tell, because they wanted the character to be Muslim. So how do I articulate that she's Muslim whilst also making it relatable, kind of, or finding a bridge? And a lot of that was basically Ramadan's a really good way because it's like everyone knows how it's like to be hungry or waiting for something and like trying to find that and then having that sort of like inconvenience come into it, people will find relatable path into that. But like yeah, it's just trying to like write your life in the most entertaining way, like find a way that yeah you can combine that. Sorry if I'm going in circles.
Mm. No, that's great. No, it's really good to think about all of the details that you've mentioned as well to do with like family and just like the way that the characters spend their time and like what they wear and like just all these simple things. So that was really helpful, like those examples that you shared. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Yeah, that's brilliant. We've got thanks so much for this, Ramsey. Really great talk. I wanted to ask you about your experience with editorial pushback on writing diverse characters, if that's something you've experienced. I got feedback for a pitch last year that got longlisted for an award, but was told that I should expect a long journey with publishing because the YA graphic novel industry is still new and it'll take longer with books with diverse main characters.
Okay. I feel like the book publishing world is almost like a separate story. I will talk about that, but let me start with the comic thing. I went into the comics thing thinking that I was gonna be there was gonna be loads of editorial pushback. I was ready to fight and found it was completely the opposite. They all were very helpful and wanted me to um like go even further. and
Nice.
so there was no pushback on the editorial front with the comics situation. Publishing, um I don't know because I have friends who've won like awards um telling their um autobiographical stories about being trans, I think publishing, especially now that Heartstopper has not only become a hit but is on its final book, so there's going to be a vacuum of all those
Mm.
readers that would want to read more now that it's not around. um and I think publishers will be totally up for that. Are totally up for that, but it's trying to find. I think the problem is trying to find a story hook that you can deliver that experience on, because the experience in itself, I'm not sure if the experience itself is strong enough. You've got to be like, okay, this is me, I'm, you know, XYZ. How do I tell that via a story, by a coming of age story? So you can find something autobiographical that is interesting to people. You can be like, oh, you know, this is a story about how I actually in love with my best friend. And then hooks that you can use as a bridge to then talk about your life. But publishers are up for it. I'll tell you that. Don't be deterred.
I'm really glad to hear that. It's nice when people can kind of, yeah, connect and listen. Um, cool. Okay, thanks. If anybody else has any questions, please let me know. I've got a few more here that we've prepared. Um, so um, I guess you kind of already covered this one, but how do you like to approach and plan out a new project? Like, what is that process like for you?
A new project. What I do is I do a lot of walking. I walk around um my local park, and I think, and I'm like, okay, let me think of a really cool, like, IMDb type log line pitch for something, and then I think of a character for it, and then I flesh it out. But I tend to just like let it percolate in my head and build it bit by bit. It doesn't come all in a flash, and yeah, that's what I do.
King's good. Yeah, definitely. Cool. Do you have any tips for anyone wanting to get into working with comics or writing?
Well, um, my tip is just do it. I got in through indie comics, which is self-published stuff, and
Yeah.
just make something. Find out about your local fair or put it online. I think, even though it's expensive, because I say that, I'm like, I was funding like, money's a big issue in the arts. And I was
Mhm.
funding everything via my office job. So sorry, let me just quickly.
It's okay, don't worry.
Sorry. So basically, what I did is, yeah, I funded everything via a my office job. So basically, you have to print the comic, you have to book a half table at a comic fair. The biggest one's Thought Bubble. So what Thought Bubble tend to do is you send your comic to them, a digital version. They read it because it's a curated festival. And a tip, if you want to get a table there, always go half table. Don't go for full table. It's easier to get in and it's cheaper. And they'll look at your book and they'll be like, you like it? And like a half table is almost like 150, £200. And if you do not live in Leeds, you have to think about a train ticket and a hotel. But, and also, you know, and like, will the amount of comics that you bring, like, will it pay for everything? I usually no. But what I think it's really good for is building a network of other writers, and you become friends with all the other people who are exhibiting their comic. And you go to like drink and draws, or if you don't drink, you can still go. And it just, having a community of comic people that you know really emboldens you and keeps you, you know, active and think about more ideas. And you're just making stuff. And how it happened for me was I was just making stuff, and then somebody from the outside just contacted me and said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" You know, so that's what I think you should do. You should just make stuff, um, take big swings, talk about stuff that's maybe scares you. I don't know, like just be ambitious about the stories that you tell, and I think it's more attractive. Like if you're being really humble, if you're like, I'm gonna do a comic about my cat, and I think people like that. It's cool, it's nice. But if you're like doing a bigger thing about something bigger, it might be more. An editor might jump more into that. You know, they're like, wow, you did a story about you and your sister getting over the bereavement of your parents or something like that. You know, that sounds like a big, deep topic, but like that's what I mean. Like if you can find something that has a bit of weight to it, that comes from the real world, and you can write about it in your own way with your own voice, I think that would be really helpful.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Lots of really helpful advice. Um, yeah. What are some like writers that inspired you, or like things that you kind of saw or read, maybe when you were younger, or maybe now even, like that inspired you?
I read loads. I think I
Yeah.
just read a lot. I've just read a lot of comics, and both had the same inspirations that you had. But the weird thing is, like, when you then get into the indie comic scene, you're you get inspired by your peers, and you get inspired by really culty artists that only comic people know about. So like, or if, like, but your peers is like underrated. People don't really talk about that. Like something that your mate does, and you think, wow, this is really cool, and like I want to do something like that, or I want to. That's giving me an idea to do this, and like yeah, and it's great.
Yeah, definitely. I think just like being with your friends and like in community with people is really good for that for sure. So somebody else has asked, do you have advice on writing pitches for IPs and original work? What art to provide, word count, key points for presentation?
Ooh, there is basically everything that I've learned from writing has weirdly come from movies, and mostly like listening to like movie podcasts and stuff. But quick off. Um, but like I feel like I never have like accurate. I don't think there's an accurate word count. But what I try to do is I go mini and then go a little bit wider. So mini would be one like sentence pitch. So if you like spoke to somebody, like I don't know, I'll use the Spider UK thing because that's what we were talking about today. So I'll be like, um, Spider, like Zarina is off work due to fasting for Ramadan, but then a dragon attack hits London, and she has to get out there and defeat the dragon. That's one sentence, and then after that, I would say one side of A4 that has a clear beginning, middle, end, where you break that one sentence into like a synopsis that's only one side of A4, and that's more attractive because the thing is, um, editors are busy people, and if you can make it a quick read and a powerful read, it's like a sentence that hooks them, that makes them go, let me read this synopsis then. The synopsis is only one side of A4. Awesome. And it makes you cut out all the unnecessary details. Like there's that character in The Simpsons, you know, the granddad who's like when he tells you a story, he's like, Anna, walk down this corner and like, oh, come on, get to the point already, and you're really bored. That's a bad pitch. A good pitch is like you get straight to the meat of it. Like this is what's happening, bish, bash, boom. You know, this is the thing. You don't worry about the side details. Think of so you don't want to be a grandpa Simpson. You gotta get to the meat of what it is. Be like, this is what it is. This is what the danger is. This is how they get onto it. You know, this kind of stuff. So yeah, and remember that an editor doesn't have that much time, so you got to make it punchy.
That is a good skill to have, definitely making things punchy.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that is pretty much all of our questions, Ramsey. Yeah, just thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant. I feel like we all learnt so much from you, and yeah, I really appreciated it. Does anybody else like have any questions or anything like that before we finish? I think yeah, like that might just be it. But yeah, thank you so much. It was really, really
Oh.
cool.
Well, I hope that's very like you have ideas for your stuff and how you can fit your like whatever demographic or community you're from, how you can tell your story. Well, okay, sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited for more people to see this as well when we put it up online. So yeah, it'll be really cool. Okay. Right. Well, thank you so much anyway. It was incredible to meet you, and yeah, I really appreciated all of the pearls of wisdom. It was really cool.
I hope I hope there was some one grain of sand that worked out. One grain
Many
that was
grains.
helpful.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you
it was
so much.
great.
Thanks, and really great to meet all you guys.
Yeah, lovely to meet you.
Bye.